Welcome to the last phase of the Cloud Study Jam. Hopefully, I mean, we are meeting after nearly a week's time, I think. So, hopefully, you all would have completed many of the labs. And these 2 days, we will be covering a few more concepts which will complete our track one of 30 days of Google Cloud. So today we are going to go like in a brief overview of the whole software development life cycle. Uh, don't worry, not our standard SADP or software engineering style for all the third and fourth years. Uh, yeah, so I'll just present my screen. Okay, I believe my screen is visible. So right, in any software that is launched, any software product, this like traditionally this was the whole setup of all the entities of the whole system. We had our product lead or product manager who would instruct developers how to go about what features they need and stuff, who would then write code and change code uh, as and when required to fulfill these instructions. And then there was a team of testers who would basically run tests or even write tests for testing the whole code base. And this test feedback was given to the developers, and the developers would write even more code to make the tests pass and bring the code up to the level of the testers. The testers are also known as QA people. QA stands for quality assurance. Quality assurance in the sense there is a particular benchmark which the code needs to fulfill in terms of the tests and how the code behaves. Then afterwards, once the code has crossed a particular threshold and the testers feel that we are good to go, then they give an approval to the ops people. Ops stands for operations, which is basically the server managers, the system admins, etc. And these ops would then take the code and then deploy it to a particular server or whatever infrastructure they're using. And the final app would be published by them. The customer would then interact with this final published app or product. And then the cycle continues where the customer would give feedback to the product manager. The product manager would give instructions, and the whole cycle continues. So this is kind of like the whole life cycle or the cycle of a particular software product. Any doubts still here? Okay. One more thing, considering that there may be juniors who would not know much about software testing. So essentially, once you write the code, like in our normal like college routine or college projects and stuff, we generally write the code. We act as a developer. We write the code, and we run the code on our machine. And once the code is running, so you essentially, like in a college project, right? If you want to make something like a simple website, so once you have written the code and the website is working, your project stops there and you are done with the project. But then essentially, as I showed, that we have a cycle of things going on. So continuously, the code is evolving, and we all know, right, that code can be fragile at times, and code can break due to various changes. So just to ensure that our code doesn't break and it behaves properly as expected, we do have tests written. Tests in the sense which are like automated tests, which would check each and every part of the code, ideally each and every part, that if it performs well or not. And these tests can either be written by the testers themselves or the developers. And the testers are generally in charge of testing the whole code base. And this is what I mean by tests. There are various types of tests. I will not go into much detail for now, but like this is the overall life cycle of a software product. I mean, this was the overall life cycle of a traditional software product. Any questions? Okay, no questions. So I think we'll move forward. So essentially, here the product lead or product manager or whatever you want to call the company and stuff, they are more focused on how the customer feels about the product, right? That the customer should be satisfied by the product, because ultimately everything is about like money, right? Because if the customer is happy with the product, then he'll give more money to the company, which is good for the company. So what the product manager will always ensure that the code or sorry, the product itself tries to satisfy the customer as according to his needs. uh, and this is what is expected from the developers. Like the product manager would take feedback from the customers. I mean, not necessarily this is one person, or it could be multiple people, but yeah, the generally a manager is one person, and like the whole team is essentially the maybe the sales people are also involved here, the marketing people are also involved, because they are like in direct contact with the customer. So there could be various mechanisms of feedback, uh, whatever, like maybe surveys in the website, surveys externally, or like in general, how the customer is satisfied and stuff. So essentially, what the product manager wants, that the product should always be in par with the customer's expectations, and the customer's expectations may change at any time, right? If the customer may see a new feature and he would say, "Oh, if this could be like this, then that would be better. If this could be like that." So essentially, the whole product is evolving at a good pace. And the main job of the developers is to write code which would evolve in such a way that the product evolves and goes on to fulfill the needs of the customer. So now what happens is the developers want to move at a faster pace, where they want to be at par with the customer's demands, and as quickly as possible they need to uh, publish a new product. I mean, new version of the product. The testers, their main job is to like test at each and every iteration of the code whether the code is functioning properly or not. So now what the problem here is, like, not exactly a problem, but there's a bit of, I would say, a conflict of interest, where developers are like, let's write the code as quickly as possible, and the testers are like, no, we have to find out the mistakes in the code, right? So the testers are kind of like stopping, I would not say stopping, but like they would kind of slow down the developers, right? They would say, wait, let us pass the test and all. I mean, that is part of their job. So here the first thing, and the testers are generally just giving feedback to the developers. So this is one part where this developer and tester, their interaction could be possibly hampering the speed of the product. But then essentially this part is important, right? Because if the code is not functioning and the testers do not point this out to the developers, then that is a big issue, which could even more negatively impact the customer. So this is kind of like a necessary evil, where the tester like kind of slows down the developer and they like make sure that he's working properly, the code is working properly and all. Now going to this part, right, the operations part. So the main job of the operations team is to make sure that the whole product runs properly into the server environment or whatever infrastructure they have. I see a few questions. I'll just pause and take the questions. Vishal is asking, do the tester need to know the coding part, or do they just run the program and check? So Vishal, there are a few kinds of testers. One of them is manual testers, who are like end users. Like they do have, I mean, manual testing is kind of like phasing out now. But essentially, what they had was a big like instruction manual. First do this, then do this. Like for example, create a new user, then register, then stuff like that. Like manual registration, which was like completely, sorry, manual interaction, which was completely like a manual task. Those were manual testers. Then there were also like testers who wrote automated tests and ran them. So they were like kind of they knew the coding part, but again they did not know the code base of the whole software. They just knew how to write tests and how the software has to perform. Pankaj is asking where do the DevOps come in the cycle? Pankaj, wait, we are coming to that. We've not reached that as yet. Okay, so yeah, Nikita also answered Vishal's question. I believe Vishal, we have answered your question. Okay, so coming back to my part, yeah. So what I was saying is like the main responsibility of the ops team is to take the code and deploy them on their infrastructure, and then finally like make it available for the customer to use. So now what happens essentially is the code is constantly changing. And again, we are not talking about just a small piece of software, right? We are talking about a big piece of software with many dependencies, many changing dependencies, and many changing working environments and stuff. So this is done by the developers, right? Where they're upgrading the dependencies, changing the requirements of the software and all. So what the ops team, I mean, the ops team does not interact directly with the code. I mean, they do not change the code, but what they have to make sure is that the code works on their infrastructure. And this was one part where we had seen the importance of Docker, right? So if the code is working on the developer's computer but not working on the infrastructure, then like that's a big problem where again like it runs on my PC but it's not running in production. So that was one part where Docker was involved, where the developer himself or herself used a Docker container and wrote code which would run on that container, and then just gave that container to the ops team, and the container was directly deployed to the infrastructure. But like traditionally the case was that these ops people had to take like maybe even not the raw code but the build binary of the code and stuff, and they had to make sure that it ran on the infrastructure. So, and the ops team was also responsible that the app is running properly and it's not stopping in the middle. It's not changing. I mean, it's not giving high error rates or high latency issues and stuff. So that was one part. Like they are also they used to like maintain the whole server and the infrastructure on which the app was running. And definitely, if there's a working system, their working server, and somebody wants to change that, then they have to go again through the whole headache of setting up the whole system again, then making sure it works, and then finally monitoring. So essentially, what used to happen was that the ops team were even more reluctant to make changes in the code base or like allow changes in the code base. So this was definitely a big issue where the developers are constantly trying to make changes, and the ops team is like not very happy with the speed, because like they are, if the system is working, then they would be happy that the system remains the same and still works. So yeah, there was a rift between developers and ops teams. So now to solve this, we had DevOps coming to the picture. I'll pause here and wait for any doubts. If any, please either unmute yourself or write in the chat box. Okay, no doubts as of now. So yeah, due to this, like to okay, ops team ensures smooth implementation of updates. Yes, so the code is updated by the developers, like the code is changed by the developers, and the production of the code, which is like giving it or making it available to the customer, that is done by the ops team, and this they have to ensure that it happens smoothly without the customer being affected. Okay. Yeah. So they like to solve the basic like difference of interest, I would say, between the developers and ops. We came up with a new concept which is called DevOps, where essentially, okay, this one, right? We had the development team, we had the quality assurance or testing team, and we had the operations team. So DevOps is basically, I would say, a combination of all three of these, where people involved in DevOps are actually like they work in all these three fields, and they have a basic, but yeah, they have a knowledge of all these three fields, and they make sure that there is no rifts. So essentially, I wouldn't say this image is like exactly correct, but yeah, essentially, mathematically speaking, development, QA, and operations are three different things, and DevOps is like the combination of all three. But yeah, I believe like going into times, development, I mean, operations is kind of reduced and like falls here into the DevOps part mostly, because we do not, so it's more like the DevOps people are more than the independent people. The either like simple development guys, QA guys, or ops guys. Like, and for many people, like many companies and all, they often say that DevOps is not just one single role. It's basically a concept or a mechanism of going forward with the software development life cycle. So essentially, the whole team follows this. So it's not, I mean, I wouldn't say it's just one single person doing that, but the whole team and their working style has to change. Okay, so what exactly happens in DevOps? So we have this particular cycle, right, where we plan. Plan is basically the project manager and the other stakeholders giving instructions to the developers. The developers coding. Then building is basically building the whole code, and continuous testing is basically where the QA and testers come into place, and they signal I mean, like they release it once the code is satisfying their testing benchmarks. Then the code is deployed by the ops team, and operate is basically like it is deployed into production and the customer you are using them. Monitoring, again, I would say monitoring and feedback come hand in hand. The ops team is making sure that the product works properly, monitoring the whole product, and the customers are basically giving feedback to the team. Yeah, I mean, I would say like your monitor, and then there is one more branch called as feedback. So operate, the customers operate, the the ops team will monitor it and give that feedback to the team, and the customers will give direct feedback of the software to the team. So this is the whole cycle, like which takes place, and DevOps is basically a combination of uh, all of these working together in tandem. So now, like one of the main parts. Okay. Yeah. So how could these essentially work together, right? The developers, the ops, and the testers. So the whole thing comes into picture when the whole process, this whole process of testing, approval, then deploying, and yeah, I mean, writing code, testing, approving tests, running tests, building the code, and deploying the code. That whole thing, when it becomes automated, that time we have less of issues, right? So as soon as the developers write the code, it's being tested continuously. Sorry, first of all, the code is being built, then uh, it's being tested continuously. Once it is approved, then it is deployed. So if this whole process is automated, it's not much of a headache for any of them, right? So an automation in a monotonous tasks is definitely better than doing it manually. So like automation is one of the ways in which DevOps works and aims to simplify this whole process. Uh, any questions? Questions? I hope it's the case that everybody is understanding, and not the case where I wasn't able to explain anything that people are like not asking me कि क्या पढ़ा था पता ही नहीं. Yes, understanding, Nikita. I know you would understand. You've already studied. Okay. The next one. Okay, fine. Yeah. No doubts, understanding. Thank you for the feedback. Uh, cool. Okay. So as we said, right, the whole system of this whole system has to be automated. And how do we automate the system? Like using, there are various softwares. Like for example, we have Docker for containerizing the whole thing. We have Kubernetes for managing the whole thing. We have automated test suites and test runners for automating the testing. We have automated uh, what are those called? Packaging softwares which like package uh, the whole code into an executable. Uh, yeah. So basically, if we automate the whole thing and we streamline the whole process, then there is no issue as such. So we'll see the levels of automation, right? Where we have CI CD. CI basically means continuous integration. Integration here comes mostly from the part of integration tests, where the whole test is run properly on the whole of the code base. So essentially, what happens once the code is written, it is built, and the built code or executable is automatically tested against our unit tests and deployed to staging automatically again, and then automatically all the acceptance tests are run against the code. Acceptance tests are basically like the final level of tests which are run by the traditionally run by the QA team. But yeah, acceptance test means like if your code is passing the acceptance test at a suitable benchmark, then you are ready to deploy the code into production. So continuous integration, like this is basically involved with coding, building the code and running tests against it. So here, this part, developers writing the code and QA is testing it, and this whole process, like this triangular process, is automated. This is what is called continuous integration. Then we move on to CD, like this was CI, continuous integration. We move on to CD. So CD essentially has two full forms. One is continuous delivery and one is called continuous deployment. Okay, so continuous delivery is one step further from this whole continuous integration pipeline. We also have a deploy to production thing. But here, as you can see, this is a manual thing where once the acceptance tests are passing, then it is manually deployed to production. So essentially, what is happening here is the whole CI pipeline plus this whole pipeline of testers approving to the QA people, and essentially also keep making it ready for production, just like as you would see in either the, I don't remember exactly, but either the Spinnaker or the Jenkins labs. It is essentially that it's just a button click away. Only one human interaction is required just to make sure that everything is working properly. So everything is done. The whole code is tested. Written, built, tested, and also ready for production. Just you need to click it once, and then it is released to the users. So this was essentially CD, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment is this whole manual thing of deploying to production is also automated. So essentially, like this whole process is automated, right from developers writing the code to building it, to testing the whole code and deploying the product into production. So this whole process automated, that is called continuous deployment. Any doubts at this particular stage? Okay, looks like no doubts. Thank you, Dhwani. Okay, so yeah, so now consider that our product has been deployed, right? It is being it is available to the users for their use. But what the operations team, as I already said, is also responsible for is to monitor the whole system which is in production, and to make sure that it does not crash, it does not fail, and it's working like as expected. So just like failure prevention, crash prevention is definitely important, but equally important is the speed, right? Speed or availability. So maybe your product is very slow and consider like a simple website, right? If it's taking time to load, then that's an issue. The users won't be happy. So you also need to make sure that the users like it is in a ready state where the users can directly use it properly, and there are no issues. So for that, you need to continuously monitor the environment, as we had seen in our cloud monitoring lab, where we were constantly monitoring the whole server to make sure that it's not crashing and it is fulfilling the basic requirements of latency, throughput, etc. So here comes another part where we need to make sure that our app is working, like a deployed app is working properly. And here is basically like this is an upcoming role in this whole product life cycle, which is SRE, called as Site Reliability Engineering, where, as the name suggests, they make sure that the site or the product is working properly. And like those are engineers working on this whole thing of monitoring stuff, and yeah, basically monitoring stuff and then reporting or even solving the issues if there are any during I mean during while the product is in deployment. Sorry for that. Okay, 1 second. Okay, yeah. So how do we come to know whether our software is working properly, right? We need some kinds of benchmark. So full site reliability engineering, also known as SRE. This is basically a concept of this was basically a role introduced by Google, and yeah, it is very much following in the concept of DevOps. And if you go much into detail of SRE and DevOps, it's essentially said that class SRE implements DevOps, where SRE is a particular paradigm or way of working. I mean, sorry, SRE is the particular path which is followed to work, and DevOps is the whole system or the paradigm. So DevOps is essentially a set of rules, and SRE is basically how those rules are implemented. Yeah, so we need to make sure that our product is working well. So there are a few technical terms which come here: SLAs, SLIs, and SLOs. So this stands for Service Level Agreement, which is basically some kind of agreement which you have with your users of the app. So if we consider in terms of say like Google Cloud, right? Google Cloud, if you are deploying your software on Google Cloud, then Google Cloud itself as a platform has to make sure that your software is working properly. So it needs to make sure that it guarantees you something like, or even let's not consider Google Cloud, let's consider a simple hosting service, right? So say for example Heroku. So when you are deploying your app onto Heroku, your website onto Heroku, then Heroku tells you something, right? That we will ensure that your app is available 99% of the time, or your app is not very slow. I mean, there is low latency in your app. So that is what is called a service level agreement, where the software vendors essentially make an agreement with their customers. So this is kind of like binding. This can be essentially legally binding also, where they have a particular bond or whatever you want to call it. So here, like now, if you are paying Heroku and you are saying expecting that Heroku will give you 99% availability of your application, but then Heroku doesn't, it fails on doing that, then essentially you can file a lawsuit or complaint against them, and that could be a problem for Heroku, right? So they need to make sure that their service level agreements are being fulfilled by them. Then coming to SLIs and SLOs. So SLI is basically service level indicator, and SLO is service level objective. So uh, now agreement, I would consider this as a legal binding, and this is basically an indicator, right? So what do you agree on? You agree on some metric, right? Like for example, your website should be available 99% of the time. So what is the metric? Your availability. Your website should not crash, for example. So that could be error rate. And your website is fast enough, so that could be latency. We could also have things like throughput, etc., etc. So this is basically an indicator. We can call this as a metric. And service level objective is like an internal objective of the company, of the team, sorry, managing the whole product. So essentially, if you see, I will just go through this. Yeah. So SLA, service level agreement, is basically a business agreement with customers, business agreement, law agreement, whatever you want to call it. SL objective, the service level objective, is basically a measurable characteristic of the SLA, but that is a metric. And an agreement can definitely have many SLOs. So you can say like an agreement would be our software doesn't crash for like 90% of the time. It has a latency of less than a second. Uh, then it has an availability of 99%, like that. And SL indicator is basically, yeah, a metric that evaluates the SLO. Just give me a minute. Sorry. One second, let's respond. Looks like we got a few yeses. Uh, yeah, so SLA is a business agreement. SLO is an objective, which is like a measurable characteristic, and indicator is basically a metric. Now, like to consider this as a service level indicator is basically X should be true. Objective is like by proportion of the time, and agreement is basically, or else there's an issue, right? A legal lawsuit or something. So, like in one small picture, SLA agreement, lawsuit, SLO objective, which is like you need to uh, fulfill some targets, SLIs, which is basically indicators or metrics which are used. So yeah, one thing. So your SLA, for example, could be something like your agreement says that your website is available 99% of the time, for example. But you may choose to keep your internal objectives on a like on a safe side, and you would say that even if our website is not available 99.5% of the time, then that is an issue, like because essentially nobody wants to reach to the level of a lawsuit, right? So you need to be a bit more safer. So if your 99% is the lowest benchmark, then you would definitely say that 99.5% is also an issue, and that is where you set your alerts and triggers. So I hope everybody has followed, and I think we have ended with today's theoretical session. We covered testing, ops, DevOps, CI/CD, SRE, SLIs, SLOs, and SLAs. So yeah, we are I think done majorly for today's uh, theoretical session, and we will move on to the labs if you guys do not have any doubts. Shall we move on to the labs? Could you explain continuous delivery and deployment again? Yeah, sure. So yeah, can you share? Yeah, Gaurav, we will share all these pictures and all later on. Yeah, continuous delivery. So basically, continuous delivery is like one step behind continuous deployment, where the whole code is written, built, tested, and ready for production. But you've just kept it. You've not released it to the public, and manual intervention is required to release the whole thing. So essentially, like you are keeping the versions ready for next deployment whenever needed. And continuous deployment is essentially like as soon as a version is ready, you just give it out to the public automatically. So the whole process is automated versus your in continuous delivery. This last step is not automatic; it's manual. Human intervention is required for that. Pankaj, did I solve your doubt? Or okay, so Nikita, I think we can move forward to the lab for today.
Yeah. We'll take the SRE part later, the SRE lab. Okay, I'll take this one. Give me a minute. I'm sorry for that. I'll share the screen. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah, so basically now what we'll do is we will understand this lab. So basically for the continuous delivery part, we have two labs, okay? Or else I'll share the complete screen. Okay, there we go. So basically for continuous delivery, we have two labs. One is we have to we have a continuous delivery pipelines with Spinnaker, and the other is with Jenkins. So I'll try to like the live lab that I'll be performing along with you, like I'll be performing in front of you all will be the Spinnaker lab. And for the Jenkins part, we will see if time permits, we will make sure to do that as well. For the theoretical part, I have a few slides for the Jenkins. So I'll explain that later. First, let's like move on with like this lab at least. So once we are done with this, I'll be explaining you a little bit about Jenkins. So, okay. So first of all, what are we planning to do in this lab is basically what we have to do. Like what exactly we have to do is like I hope everyone is now clear with what continuous delivery is, right? So what continuous delivery is. It is basically whenever someone updates a code, everything will be done automatically. The builds, the testing, the deployment, all of that should be done not by the developer but by something. Okay, now, what that something can be, like Ali already explained continuous delivery. I hope you all remember that diagram that he had shared, like he explained you all there. So who does that, all of that things? Okay, we need some tool to do all these things. So basically there are two things. One is, okay, let me share this. Okay. So basically, this will be the slide that I'll be explaining you all for the Jenkins part. But for now, I want you all to understand that like all these concepts are clear. Now we'll be just seeing it in a practical way. But before that, we have to, like, why do we have SpinNaker and why do we have Jenkins, these four tools? So basically, Jenkins is this part. It handles these things very efficiently. Like whenever there is some trigger, it like whenever there's some change in the code, it builds. As soon as I do some change in my code and I push it to the repository, it is watching that repository that, oh, there is a change. I need to make a new Docker image for that change, like for the complete code, and I'll test it. I'll like do some test. I'll trigger it, I'll package it. So this all is done by Jenkins. So once it's packaged completely, then comes the SpinNaker. What SpinNaker will do is it will completely, perform the system test. What do I mean by system test? Like on the server itself, like any, if there's any failure in something or etc. All those things, as well as it like after that it also deploys it. What do I mean by deploying is all of you by now know what deploying is, right? So as soon as it perform it, like all the tests are passed and everything is done, SpinNaker automatically, or after a manual yes, it makes sure to deploy all the changes. So like in this lab, what is SpinNaker internally, it uses something called as Packeter or this like Jenkins as well. So in this lab we don't have to worry much about setting up Jenkins etc. We only have to worry, like we only have to set up SpinNaker, that's it. Okay. So everyone is clear of like what we are trying, like, okay, I'll tell again, like what we will do in this lab is basically, you all can see as well. So also, okay, before that you all can see as well, we will be setting up SpinNaker and onto our like this virtual machines, like this G Cloud, and we will be downloading a sample code. We will make a little change in that code, we will push it to GitHub, and then we will see how it all happens automatically using a few triggers and few SpinNaker commands. We will see how it is automatically deployed as well reliably. And so basically, yeah, this is what the aim or the motive of this lab is. So I'll try to perform it in front of you all so that you all understand the flow. Before asking you all a question, let me explain you this architecture. So basically what's happening here is, let's say,
Nikita, sorry to interrupt you. We are seeing your PPT slide. You are not sharing the other part.
oh, sorry, thanks Rudy for pointing it out.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Also, Prathamesh is asking, why do we need two separate entities for deployment and testing? Prathamesh, basically, initially we had Jenkins. What Jenkins used to do was, it used to, like as soon as the developer used to code and push it somewhere, what it used to do was it used to build, it used to perform some tests on it. Like if, okay, so let's say something is working on my machine, like on my function, as like let's say I am implementing one file, that's it, I've changed one file, I have tested it, it's working. But when I have to perform it like for everyone, like let's say for the whole team, so that is called as integration test. That when I tested my code, it was called as unit test. But when like I wanted to test the same code for everybody, it was called as like keeping in mind the whole structure or the whole architecture doesn't get or destroyed, or and like because of that one change, that will be called as integration testing, that keeping in mind the whole architecture of the system. So initially Jenkins was used to make sure that all these things are working. Then slowly and eventually, like it was used for building, for all those things. But then there was something that I needed to deploy as well. So then SpinNaker came. I think it was developed by Netflix. It is also open source. And if you'll ask me the differences between them, one of them is deployments, as I said. The second difference is also that SpinNaker is a multi-cloud environment. Like SpinNaker is basically, you can say, mostly used for clouds as well, like GCP, Microsoft Azure, it's all those things. And for Jenkins, I still have to manually do some things in order to make sure that it is working with different cloud environments as well. And SpinNaker provides me that all very easily. Like I don't have to do much things. So did it clear your doubt that why did I like Spinnaker came at the first place? Also, Jenkins also has a few plugins. Like I can use a few. Okay, I'll tell that part later since we are moving out of time. Okay. So yeah, for this part, yeah. So in like initially I was not sharing my screen, but I hope you all got what we are doing. And before like this, what we will be building here is basically I am a developer. You all are developers. Cloud source repositories, you can consider this as a GitHub. Like this is a GitHub repository. Whenever there's some change in the code, there will be a build. We all know, right? Whenever our application is done building, we need to build a containers from them. So I'll be building a container out of it. Then Spinnaker will see, oh, I have a new container. That means I need to do something. This Spinnaker will start working. Now what it will do is basically this Kubernetes engine part is basically like the cluster where I have downloaded my Spinnaker, and this cloud storage part is basically Spinnaker needs this some like it needs some build pipelines, like what should be next step, what should be the next step after this, like what the user should say. And once the code is building, it needs to store some data of that artifacts that we call, like it needs to store all of that somewhere. So basically for that it will be using this cloud storage, and it will be using all these things along with the container build. And once that is done, it will be like once we I'll show you in the lab how it's done. So it will be like in the canary, like we all know like canary deployment and production deployments, right? So Spinnaker will then be used to do perform all these things. So whenever user is coming using the load balancing part, I can either redirect the user here or here, like depending on the configurations. So in this lab, what we'll be doing is we'll be changing something, we'll be doing these things, and yeah, all these things. So is everybody clear about what we are going to do? Okay, before asking you all a question, one more thing. I will see this application delivery pipeline. It is very similar to what I just talked about. Let's see what's it. Developer will change some code, and it will create a git tag and push to repository. Why am I creating a git tag? Because whenever like after some time you all will see that I'll be creating a trigger that will say whenever there is a new tag with something called as v.star, that is basically a new version of that code is created, you have to detect it. You have to build a docker image out of it. You have to run unit tests to see that yeah, if at least like your part is working, then push the docker image. Once this is done, what like then Spinnaker will be notified, oh, we have a new docker image, let's like detect it. Then once I have detected this image, I know that there is some change in the code. Now since there is some change in the code, we need to deploy that, right, so that other users can use it. So we'll deploy it to Canary, we will do functional tests. And then once someone like some user approves it, like we all know, right, Canary is only for a few users or something. So once that Canary percentage is passed, approve, I have got the approval, it will be deployed to production so that it is used by all the other users. So this is what like we will be doing in this lab. So can I get a few yes or a no if like we are like understood like what we have to do, so that I can then start the lab? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Okay, perfect. So, yeah, the target of the lab is like, I hope achieved, like what we have to do. Before starting the lab, let me just go through this lab so that like you all understand. Initially, we have to activate all those things, that's fine. Or else I'll start it. Uh, Actually, I have what I'll do is give me a moment, just a moment. Um, yeah. So I think I lost that one. So I got it now. Yeah. So I'll start this. And again to mention, I had already like done this lab, so I'll be just pasting the commands, but it's very much recommended that you write those commands so that you all understand what's exactly going on. Writing the commands yourself, there's a difference between writing and copying, right? So for now, I'll copy it because I'm doing it the second time. I think I'll have to share my entire window. Hmm. Yeah, I'll activate it till then. Till then, object we have covered the objectives, the application delivery pipeline, the setup, and everything is done. So we can skip this. We'll just simply start from here. So what we are basically doing here is like if you all must have remembered, remember we had a Docker image that we had created and like we had run the if you all remembered or not just remember, you all know that I can run any server or anything on my Docker image, right? So now I am doing nothing but inside my Kubernetes cluster I am running this SpinNaker. Okay, so inside this cluster, I'll be running this SpinNaker. SpinNaker is nothing but a tool, as you will see it very soon, how it looks and what it does. So I'll be creating a cluster. By now, everyone knows how to create Kubernetes clusters, right? And the machine type and all those things. I'll be naming that cluster as SpinNaker tutorial. So yeah. If anyone like wants to do it, but I think alongside it will be a little tough for you all as well. I'll complete it in I think 15 minutes. Let's see. So yeah, what I did was I set the zone. I created a cluster. So inside this cluster, I should get for now nothing, but it should be named after SpinMaker tutorial. Okay. So till then the cluster is created. Let's move. Okay. Until then, while the cluster is getting created, let me tell you about one concept which is called as Helm. So as you can see, there is a section called as deploying SpinMaker using Helm. Now, what is Helm is basically, let's say if you want to download something, like download some, you all know NPM, right? You can download anything from here. Or for like by now, you all know the Docker Hub, right? You can download any pre-built image, let's say of MySQL or some images that are already there. So why first of all we need Helm is basically Helm contains all your Kubernetes configuration files. We know, right? The deployment configuration file, the service configuration file that we have, like service.yml, deployment.yml, all those files. Now what happens is basically if I have those files and if I have them, you all know, right? In that file everything is almost very similar. What we do is we only change the names, we only change the name of the tab. But for like if I have 5 deployments, I almost all of the other things are same. I only have to change the name of that deployment, etc., right? Or the port number. So what Helm or like what would be better is, let's it can be a template. I should have one template file, template.yml, and I should have 5 values.yml files. So in that template I don't have to write for 5 deployments, I don't have to write those 5 deployments again and again, right? For example, for production, for canary, for other things, all those things, I don't have to write them like 5 times all those values. What I'll do is I'll use that template. In that template I'll only pass a few like values, like 2 or 3 values file. Like for production there should be a values file which has these things. If you want an example, I can give you for an example. Let's say DSC Vijay emailed all of you, right? Like you have completed these many labs, or you haven't completed any labs. So what DSC Vijay did was, it didn't, like, we didn't write all those things again and again, like for all those 400 people. We didn't write it again and again, right? What we did was, we had one template, and we had one like value for all the people. Like for all the 400 people, we only had values. Like for, let's say, Vishal, we had a value of 5, that he has completed 5 quests. For Gaurav, we have value of 4, that yeah, he has completed 4. For Payal, we have 6. So in that template, we only inject those values, right? So that is the concept also used in Helm, that we have the file or the template of configuration files, and we only have to pass different types of values in it, either by using command line or by using the files. Okay, so this was the concept of Helm that I wanted to cover upon. What Helm does is, it is basically a package manager. If I, let's say, so I hope you all understood the concept of templates and all these things, charts. Like these are called as that, the whole thing will be chart. So once like Helm internally, like not internally, it basically, even if I download it, I can see these templates and the values files. So what Helm is basically, it is like already people have created some common deployment files, and if I want to use them, like for example, I had seen an example of Elasticsearch. If I want to like use a deployment of that uses Elasticsearch inside it, I will directly pull it from Helm, and I can directly use it on my machine. I don't have to write it again and again. So did you all understand this concept of injecting the values inside templates that Helm uses, as well as Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes, you can say. Like for NPM, we do all that someone has already created, I just use it, I don't write my own code again. And Helm is basically used for those configuration files. If someone has already created it, I can use it, or as well as push it. So was this concept clear to all of you? I can move ahead then. Yes, yes. Okay, great. So I hope the cluster is created as well. Yeah. Now what I'll do is basically, okay. So once this, like basically what I have to do is, as I told you all, right? Do you all remember, if you all remember in this, where was it? Yeah, in this diagram, I had told you all that uh, this I need the access to cloud storage. The Spinnaker cluster also needs this access to the cloud storage as well, right? So for this, I need to provide permissions, that yeah, you can use this storage or all those things. So this, like this section is nothing but a sort of giving permissions to everyone. Like yeah, Spinnaker, you can use the cloud storage bucket. So for before that, like before giving all those things, giving the permissions, these are few commands that basically take your like creates one admin role, you can say, for Spinnaker. Later we will use this role, and we will say yeah, this role can basically use this cloud storage, or this role can use this thing. So I'll just paste them. This is exporting SA email. This is a variable that I'll be using later. So and project, we all know we have a something called as a project ID. So the role that we create, like I am giving it the role of admin to the, like the account that I just now created. This was the account that I created, and I am giving the name, like I'm binding it, you can say, basically, as it says bind, like giving the role of admin. Yeah, you're the admin, you can basically create or do anything you want. So did I get an error? No, I got like other roles as well, bindings. Fine. Like with this email, like we all know, right? With whenever we authenticate something, we get some key. Like yeah, this is your key to the lock. You can authenticate later. So that was my key that I'll be using later. Okay, that is done. Now what I want to do is basically I'll be I hope like by now everybody knows what is publisher or subscriber. What I'll be doing is basically creating a topic, and the Spinnaker will subscribe to that topic. the topic will be basically whenever, like you can see, it is a container registry. So whenever there is any change in the container registry, whenever there is a new Docker image, SpinMaker subscribe to it and like do whatever that I'll tell later, like after subscribing what you have to do. But please subscribe to it so that you know that you can detect a new image. So now we are doing this step. For it to detect a new image, I have to create a topic that SpinMaker can subscribe to. So let's do that. I hope I can complete this in the next 10 minutes so that we can cover other topics as well. So I have created a topic. The topic is like named after the project that I have done. And okay, so the subscription, like the topic is basically what the container registry will have, like any new Docker image. The subscription, I am naming it as GCR triggers, and it will be looking into this topic. GCR is nothing but Google Container Registry that has the Docker images. So it is triggering it to take it up. Now this is nothing but very simple. Like we have already done this before also. I'm just repeating it again, that I like this is the thing, and I'm binding those triggers. Like I'm basically giving permission to SpinMaker that yeah, you can access all these things. You can see the role. If you want to read more, I'm not going into obviously the details of these add IAM policy binding, and like if you want to read in detail, we can see that later. For now, let's just say we are giving the permissions. So yeah, so by now what we have done, can anyone write in the comment section like what I have completed in this task? We have basically simply okay, I think it would be difficult for you to write. Let's just skip that. What I've done is basically made sure that SpinMaker is listening to the topic. Okay. Now, by then it was getting created. I hope like I have explained you all the concept of Helm. Now inside this Helm, I'll be deploying this SpinMaker. Let's see how. Before that, let's get this Helm. Like we don't have it, right? We have to install it. So let's install, like how you install the NPM first also. Okay. I think I don't have to use it. Let's just enter so that it gives me the error. Fine. wget is basically what you will use in Linux to get all the binary files from there, and I'll get a tar file and I'll unzip it. Yeah, done. So I'll change the directory. Again, for stressing on this part, please don't okay, obviously you can copy those like these commands, no worries, but when you're doing tar and all those things, make sure you write so that things are more clear to you. So what I did was basically everything that I have inside this, please copy it here itself. And basically the Helm that I have, again, this is again the permission part, that giving Helm the admin role in my cluster, like inside this Kubernetes cluster that I'm doing, I'm giving it the admin role as well. So we'll do that. Give me a minute. Don't worry about all these things. When we'll see what has been created, it will be more clear. Okay. So what we have done till now here was we installed Helm, the binary files. We unzipped them, and we basically what we did was we did everything. Like, okay, it's your cluster, right? Anyone that needs some access to that cluster, we need to provide the right permissions to them. Like initially we provided SpinMaker the right permissions to access my cloud storage, or access not the cloud storage, for now the cluster as well. So here also we are giving the Helm as well as the SpinMaker the the admin roles, cluster admin roles, so that I can I can give the permission to SpinMaker that if whenever you want to deploy something, feel free to deploy it. There won't be anyone to ask you that who are you. I'm giving you the admin role for that. So yeah, that's what we did here. And like there's something called a stable chart, so we need that later. So that's why I used it, because I wanted to download the SpinMaker from there. So yeah, now configure SpinMaker is basically okay. This like, I hope, like, I know these things would be a bit new to you, but yeah, once you understand them it will be very simple. Next, configure SpinMaker. Now for configuring SpinMaker, let's say first of all what it's doing is basically project, we this project value it's giving it inside this project variable. Bucket, it is basically like giving the bucket value, that bucket will be named after this project, then SpinMaker config. And then what I'm saying is, if you all remember by the like cloud storage part, we are MB means making this bucket, make this bucket regional inside this region, and the what bucket like name and all. So basically I'm giving it this URL that yeah, you can go inside this bucket as well. So the MB is doing nothing but making a bucket for me. Why am I creating a bucket? I'm creating it to store all the pipeline configuration. So basically, let's say SpinMaker dies, okay, due to something, like it dies due to let's say anything happens. So I can, what SpinMaker will do is it will immediately take whatever the build pipeline was inside this cloud storage, and it will create a new one again. So yeah, it's storing everything in this bucket. So I hope like what we are doing here now is clear to everyone. I have created a project. Done. Done. And this. So the bucket is created. Um, what this will do is basically okay, when I say don't copy, it's okay if you copy this thing, okay, but yeah, we are understanding it, so that's fine. So basically this is a YML file that is created. It is basically used to install SpinMaker, like with what configurations I want to install SpinMaker inside my like this cluster. It is basically giving all those commands that, if you all remember, the SAJSON was basically that key, and the project is our project. Bucket is again the bucket that like I'm mentioning, if whatever the bucket is, this is the bucket. And later I'll mention that whenever like you want to use a bucket for the storing your pipeline, use this bucket, okay. And yeah, all the like all of them, like even I don't know every field in detail, but this is basically that I am asking SpinMaker with this to get all the GCP, like whatever services that Google Cloud Platform provides. I'm asking it to give me, like you all know, like we need this service of publisher subscriber. I want SpinMaker to use it, so that's what it is doing. So I'll just copy it. With this it will be sure that yeah, like this is how I want SpinMaker to be. Yeah, I'll paste it. Then nothing, I'll just simply like finally I'll be using this helm and this SpinMaker configuration file that I have made to install, like you all remember I had this something called as stable. So I'll be using all these things that I made to install my SpinMaker how I want inside the cluster, with all the permissions as well. So let's do that. We have done nothing. We have only added the permissions. We have only created a bucket, and we have like used SpinMaker, created the SpinMaker inside a Kubernetes cluster, and we have like used it, downloaded it using Helm. So, and this is basically, if you all remember by the Docker part, right? Like in Docker, how we used to port forward things. Like if I am using localhost 8,000 inside my port, whenever I do that, please redirect me to the Docker containers port 80. So this is nothing but a 9,000 is where inside the cluster that SpinMaker is running, and I am basically forwarding it here. If you all have a doubt in this, like what is this namespace default, telling you all in very short manner that namespaces are something that Docker uses to separate the Namespaces are basically something that like we used to separate, like this is something very separate from this. Like if I want to separate, isolate two things from each other, I use the concept of namespaces. Even Docker uses the concept of namespaces.
Hello, Nikita. You there? Uh, Nikita, we can't hear you. She left the meeting. I think she's rejoining again.
I hope before getting disconnected, whatever I spoke initially was like audible to you all. So, like till the port forward part, um, I think. Okay, everything is sorted now. Let's wait for some time. Um, then we will. It says 5 to 8 minutes. Okay, let's wait. Till then, let's see what next we have to do. Like till here, anyone has any doubt? I'll see the chat section till then, or I can move ahead explaining what's next. We didn't do anything. Like we honestly only set up this Spinnaker inside our cluster, and we port forwarded it. We added permissions, right permissions. We added a cloud storage for Spinnaker to access it. We understood the pipeline of like how the build pipeline should look like. So does anyone have any doubt here till here? Till then our Spinnaker is done as well. Nice. No doubts. Okay, I'll wait for a few more yes or no. Okay, no. Okay. Second years. Cool, great. Our Spinnaker is like done as well. So let's see like how this Spinnaker finally looks like. I'll go to the web preview. It says preview on port. Okay, let's go. Inside my when I am doing preview on port 8080, it is basically forwarding it to port 9000 inside there. So okay, give me a moment. Um, okay. I didn't do the okay. Again, the same mistake. I didn't do the port forwarding part. I forgot to do that. Sorry for that. Uh, that's why it was not able to understand which port are you talking about. So I've done that. Now I think it should work on work here. Yeah, finally the spinnaker is ready. So we can like finally everything is set up. Now we can understand this continuous delivery part. Okay. So mm, yeah, next part is okay. I think we did this. So next is basically building the Docker image. What we will do is this is nothing but I need some code right inside my repository to like a basic code template. So for that I'll be using this Docker image. So yeah, we have taken this. I'll change this and make the new directory and copy things and all that thing. This is basically setting up a basic code inside my machine. So also since I'll be dealing with git many of the times what like this has done is for the user email it will be taking this email and for the username also so that I can you do git push and all those things. So this is my active cloud configuration. Okay, and I'll do the username as well. This is my username. So everything is set. So yeah, like I hope everything like now whatever the code we had copied for that Docker image, I will be like making these are the basic Git commands that I'm doing it. I'll just run these very fast. So yeah, this was my initial commit that I made to the repository. But obviously, I haven't created any repository yet. You all know, right? In the Git, you create a new repository. So we are not exactly using Git directly. We'll be doing it through gcloud source repos. So I'll create it this way, and this is basically configuration things that make this configuration work. Like whatever the global configurations that I had done previously. Um, by add origin what I mean is I hope like most of you know. In case you all don't know what I'm saying is whatever inside like here also I had made a folder right inside which I had copied all this code. So all that code whenever I say git push where it should push that code is I'm saying that this is where you should push all the code whenever I say you. So this is what I mean that git remote add origin. So doing that and finally pushing it. So this was the first push that I made, like the first basic code push. Um, so we can see the source repositories here, and we can see like in Git as we can see that here as well. Till then, like I'll just make sure like this is like we will see the sample app there and once it loads. After that, okay, it's done. So yeah, you can see this part like all these things I had initially downloaded it and now I have it here. So yeah, it has all the code. If you see, it is basically this has a go these has it has the go files where like it does all the things basically of the code which we don't have to care about right now. Next is configure your build triggers. What I am doing is basically okay. We told SpinMaker to detect if whenever there is a new Docker image, but we haven't yet told Docker to detect whenever. Okay, so I want to build something that whenever there is a change in the GitHub repo, like this sample repo like detect it and create a new Docker image. Okay, so we need to build this part as well. But this is like inside this. If you all remember in the pipeline architecture, this is like this step we have completed. Now we are doing this step. Okay, I think we will do it very quickly now. Is everybody following along? Like if you all feel that I should like simply, instead of creating them, I should rather simply explain you, like going through instead of rather showing you all these things. Like what do you all want me to do? Should I like simply go through it instead of performing it in front of you? I have performed like almost, like in not the score but for the concepts we have completed almost 60%, 40% is remaining still. So what should I do? I'll just wait for your like few suggestions that should I like uh, execute the commands, or should I now just go through? It's fine that if I end the lab because I already have it, so that's not an issue. So what should I do? Go through it? Okay, 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 fine. We'll go through it. Um, okay, let's build this cloud trigger. Like I hope like you all now understood what did I mean when I say build the cloud trigger. So let's go to cloud build, create a triggers. Okay, I have to create a new trigger. Um, there should be an action here. Now we will understand this continuous delivery part, that I had pushed the code. Now whenever I am pushing something new, there should be someone that builds that image out of it, starts deploying that image, all those things. Now we will like once the setup is done, we'll now understand that. I don't know why it's loading so slowly. Okay, I got a create trigger part here. So I'll create a trigger. What this trigger will do, I hope all of you understood, right? Whenever there is a change in the GitHub code, create a new Docker image out of it, so that my stack, SpinNaker can understand that, yeah, I have a new image. Okay. So sample app tags. Okay. Naming it tags because whenever I'll be renaming the tags, it will be renamed that way. Uh, okay, so select your newly created. Okay, basically repository is our sample app repository that I created. Now I'm creating a trigger for that repository, and like whenever I push new tag, I need this trigger to take place. And okay, then what the regular expression should be, whenever I like create a new tag with this like with this regular expression, let's say whenever I'll be saying get tags v.1 or dot 0, make sure that you call this triggered. Or whenever I say v dot anything, make sure that you call this trigger. Okay, when like basically I'm creating a new version, right? So this is done. So cloud build configuration, this is fine. So I think we have done it. I'll simply create the trigger. If you all want to see what this like this cloud build.yml file had, it basically was simply like telling it to create like a new Docker images and all that, all those steps. Basically it will follow these steps then. Not going into detail of this, obviously, just wanted to show you all that if whenever you had any doubt like what these things are doing, you all can simply go inside it and see like what is happening. So the trigger is created. Yeah, so finally the trigger is created. The next thing I want to do is basically what are we doing here? Prepared. Okay, so basically initially the cloud bucket that we had created, that was for using SpinNaker pipelines. But now I want to now what I want to do is basically I want to use these things. You can say not the exactly the pipelines, but the manifest. So what do I mean by manifest is whenever like I need some storage where I can store all the YML configuration files of Kubernetes inside, right? Like all the configuration files that I'll be using. So all those things I'll be pushing them inside. Like for that, for storing them, I'll be needing a cloud storage again, right? for that. So yeah, like this is simply do repeating the stuff, but instead of like storing the SpinNaker pipeline here, I'll be storing Kubernetes manifest files here. So I'm doing. I hope like you all are not confused. The why are we creating the bucket two times? I hope you all have understood why this is happening. Where is my Cloud Shell now? Hmm. Since we are doing the SpinNaker part in detail, the Jenkins part, I'll just go through the slides in like 5 minutes, and I'll hope that you all will be able to follow then. Um, I have to change the directory, right? Give me a moment. So I have completed creating a trigger. I hope like you all understood why are we creating a new bucket as well. Um, Telling it this is my project. Actually, if even if we don't export it, we have already exported it, so that was also fine. I am creating a new bucket for storing all the Kubernetes manifest files, and then I need versioning in my bucket. So basically, whenever I change the manifest file, like from let's say today it's something else, tomorrow I change it a little bit. It should be versioned, right? Like I should know this was the new version created, and previous versions are also there. So this is what I do when I say versioning. Then um, so basically we already have like inside this project we already have inside this Kubernetes deployments files. Anywhere where project is written, they have written the project by default. Anywhere where it is written, please replace it with my project ID. This is what this command is doing, because otherwise it will give me an error that this project is not valid part, right? So dollar project meaning replace it with this project ID. So this is what we have done here. This was a new commit. Okay, so since it was a like finally I am tagging whatever I have done with this version 1, right? So I tagged it. I'll push this tag to the repository. Now when I pushed it, you can see that inside like here, if I go inside Kubernetes and deployments, all the project wherever the project is written, that would be replaced. Okay. uh, okay now like to see all these things, all that history and all, I'll give me a moment. I should be able to see the builds. This was the new build that I had created. Okay. um yeah, so this build is still getting created in this source app. We will wait for this build to finally complete. I think it took around 4 minutes for me initially. Till then we will see what next to be done is. So like we now did was nothing but we changed our files and we pushed them inside the git repo. Now to in order to work with the SpinNaker, we need like there's something called a spin, which is a command line utility. Like instead of going here again and again, I can directly use spin, and like so I'll download that spin basically, and I'll make it executable so that I can run all the commands very simply here itself. Okay. So we are done. Like we have finally done all those things, like doing these creating triggers, making the like configurations files, setting up SpinNaker, all those things. Next is finally we will be creating the deployment, like this deployment pipeline. Let's see like what we'll be doing it. There is basically initially all these things are okay, owner email and all that stuff. Where like yeah one, like in this pipeline, all the stages that I need to do, like all the build pipelines are written inside this pipeline deploy.json file. So if I go here, pipeline deploy.json, I am asking SpinMaker to like using the spin part. I am asking it to basically execute everything that is written inside it. Now I won't be going into detail what's written inside it. Once we will be seeing it inside the SpinMaker, that once the pipeline is created, you all will understand that yeah, like this pipe. Just make sure remember that that pipeline was created because of this file. If you want to like understand more in detail, you can definitely read it, right? So this build is not yet created. So we will be creating this pipeline, and once that pipeline would be created, we will be going to this application, we will be seeing the pipelines, and we will say that start manual execution. That I will say, okay, I have built everything. What you have to do, SpinMaker, is you can start like seeing all the changes and all those things. So this pipeline will have a few stages, as you can see. So these few stages, once it works, we will see like what's happening is basically what it will do is, let's say I have like inside the code I have back end, front end, and that too I have to like make it on canary. First of all, deploy it as a canary deployment, and then finally as deploy production deployment. Okay, so initially it will deploy this backend, front end, it will deploy these services as well. After doing this, it will say yeah, if it is green, it will say that yeah, everything is working fine, deploy to production. When I say, like, it will ask me that canary things are working fine, the tests have passed, do you want me to deploy this to production? If like I have to, there would be a manual check here, like it would have been written here somewhere. So when I say yes, okay, go for the production, it will deploy all those things to the production by itself. Okay, so if you remember earlier, I had explained that operations team, initially people used to manually deploy them, going inside the servers, writing the commands, downloading new stuff, downloading new code. But now it will all be done by SpinMaker only by my one yes. So this was like about DevOps also. So once it is deployed to production, like once I say continue, it will be deployed to production as well, and I'll be getting the IP addresses. Like from here I can go there as well. So if you all will be thinking like what that all that code was like here, does anyone have doubts? No, right? If you all are thinking like what this code here is, etc., so basically that code was nothing but it was wherever that's like a Kubernetes part, in whichever node it was running, it was printing out the you can say values of that part, right? So initially you can see this is orange in color. Okay, so yeah, like basically this was very simple, right? I had like executed a command for building a pipeline. Whenever I went to that pipeline, it will ask me that canary part is done. Do you want me to do, if like, do you want me to do it like send it to production? If when I said yes, then only it gave me this. Now if I hadn't changed this project part there, like replace the project with project ID, it would have given me error because it wouldn't have got the node, etc. there. Then these all things would have given return some error, and I wouldn't have been able to send it to production as well. So yeah, this was done. Now the next thing is, it is again like it is seeing that if whenever I change the pipeline and change anything from the pipeline, what happens is, so it says replace all the orange things with the blue things. Okay, inside this common service.go, you can go there and see what's happening, but replace all those orange things with the blue color. So I committed it. Now you all remember that, yeah, like in the, we had added a trigger whenever there is a git tag v start, like whenever there is a change starting with v, create a new Docker image. Since the Docker image was created, SpinMaker also detected the Docker image and it started working on its deployment pipelines as well. So like all this was like done, and again a new build will be created. Like this is how developments also happen, right? A new build is created, and that's it. Like a new pipeline will be created and asking me for all these things, I'll say yes, and then it will be done. So for the canary deployments, like if you will go there to that URL, finally you can see that yeah, it's blue in color. But since it was not yet done for like production part, for the production version, it's still orange. Okay, so if I'll like do it to production, it will also be changed to blue once the canary part is done. So I think if I like manually do it and show you all, honestly, it will take like a lot of time, and we already have like completed the time limit. So like, was this lab clear to all of you, like what we had done, etc., or any doubts that you have? Like I have completed the lab, but yeah, if anyone has any doubts, you can ask us. All of you are fourth years, any second or third year, because you all like easily understand concepts, right? For second years, do you have any doubts or anything? Do we have second years, like, or everyone left, got bored? A few, yes, no. um, so yeah, like I've completed this lab, I'll end it and it's okay. I lost some credits. Yeah, it was very simple. Like you can also go through the code as well. Like I went through, it was simple to understand. So for the Jenkins part, I'll very quickly go through this and a little lab in like 10 minutes, and we'll like wrap it up all those things. For Jenkins is basically like every like Ali had mostly explained CD, and Jenkins is nothing but one tool that handles all of that, right? So it will be very simple for me to explain it. So like if you all have remembered from there, okay, no doubt, but it's tough to grasp. Yeah, it's definitely tough to grasp. Even it was like tough for very tough for me as well. Took me like one day, complete day to do all those things. So yeah, definitely you have to revise. Um, and yeah, any doubt you can ask on Slack as well. So for Jenkins, just like explaining you all what happens is, let's say I have a master node. Like what basically happened, like you all must have seen Spinnaker, right? Now we'll be in this lab, we have to download Jenkins and do all that stuff again, or like all you can see all those deployments, the same deployment, all that you can see here. Now only we have to use Jenkins, okay, not the Spinnaker. Spinnaker was a tool that made it easy for us. Now we'll be using Jenkins. But theoretically, like till here you only have to configure things. Like you all remember, we set up Helm, we how we did for Spinnaker, that's it. Like it's very similar till here. You have to do connections, etc., provide the permissions. Then this is also the project is very like it's same, exactly same. So finally after that, yeah, so like this lab is exactly same, it does all the same things, just that it's basically creating the Jenkins pipeline. What do I mean when I say the part like Jenkins pipeline? um okay, let me, like I had taken a screenshot, give me a moment. I'll try to show you. um okay, so
आया सब तेरे को?
so you all remember the Jenkins
स्मार्ट थी।
Spinnaker dashboard, right? So I'll share this image also with you all.
मोनिल ने भी भेजे और
One
गर्ल्स
second.
ग्रुप पे भी थे ही आंसर्स। मोनिल ने भेजे, गर्ल्स ग्रुप पे भी आंसर्स थे।
Okay.
आई डोंट नीड
Like when I was doing the lab, I had taken this screenshot. So just telling you all, whenever you like deploy the app Jenkins, as you all remember the Spinnaker UI that was getting shown.
अरे तेरे को कुछ
Now
मेल
we'll be
नहीं आया
getting
क्या?
a
चेक
Jenkins
करना अभी
UI
तक
where
हैकेथॉन
we'll
का।
be posting like adding all these things, and this is how the Jenkins part looks like. Here you'll have to build your own pipelines, etc. But in this lab they have already created it for you, so no
क्या
worries
लगता
there.
है होगा अपना?
And this was the like service instance that I had, like this was the, like I am just showing you all in the screenshots, like this is what I had done. So instead of Spinnaker you will get to see these
मैं
things,
तेरे को
okay.
लैब रेसिपी
And once
कराने
you
के लिए।
run that after deploying, this is how it will look like to you. So yeah, I'll again come back to the PPT and simply explain you about, like I'll only take 5 minutes pakka, but I'll just explain you about the Jenkins file. let's just skip this part. You all can go through the PPT later. That's fine. So what happens is there are stages, right? Whenever I am done deploying my code, like whenever I am done doing any changes in the code, there are few stages. So basically in Jenkins, inside this file like pipeline, we called it as a Jenkins file. What I do is I create something called as stages, and like these stages will be, let's say this is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So these stages are initially built. So here I have write echoed only, but let's say if you have a Java project, what you will write is like Spring Boot, this Maven project, you will write Maven build your project or whatever that command is. Okay. When I say test, it will run all your unit tests, or like I can parallelly like write here parallel, and I can run unit tests as well as integration tests inside this. When I say deploy, it will basically write the corresponding steps. So these are the stages, and these will be the steps. And when I say like this was the structure of the pipeline. And when I say agent, like let's move on to like what is agent. When I say the Jenkins pipeline, so agent can be any meaning like this Jenkins node has something called as the build executor that takes care of all these agents. So agent is whenever I say agent, it is any meaning like anything that is available, give it to me. Like run all those pipelines in that agent. That is fine. When I say Maven build, if there is one node that is empty or cluster, like one machine that is empty, please build it there. You decide. When I say none meaning I am not giving you globally what to decide. Please inside all those stages you mention the agent. Like for build stage, you if you have particular requirement, do that. If for test stage you have particular requirement, do that, etc. And then finally you can also have an agent like a Docker agent. Like when I say in like this is the image, inside this image I want you to run this build pipeline or this test. So you can do that. And inside this agent I can also have a Kubernetes agent, like in create a cluster, etc. So this was about Jenkins. And like the lab you will do, honestly it's exactly the same. That does we took like more time with Spinnaker, so that things are pretty clear when you do the Jenkins part. um so like yeah, I think I'm done. I like expanded by like extended it by some more time. But yeah, so any doubts or anything in what Ali explained, in what I explained, or any doubts on today's session? After that we can end this. No? Okay. So yeah, Palak, are you there? Ali, you all can say anything. Ali, we can stop, right? Like we are done for the today's concepts.
Yep. Yes. Palak, if you're there, you can stop the recording.
Yes, okay. So tomorrow again we have a session from 5:45 to 7:30. Uh, meet you all there.
Yeah.